Okay, sorry, it took me just a second to get our live feed working, so it appears to be working now. So let's go and get started with tonight's sky. Alright, first thing we're going to do is actually take the title away. And this is the sky looking tonight, roughly in the west. And if you notice a couple of things, what we're going to do is actually just speed up time. We're going to let ourselves have a sunset. And let's see what's up in our evening sky tonight. Now, you might notice something if you have been going outside right at sunset, looking towards the west, you'll notice something that's been extremely bright all season long. And that is, of course, the planet Venus. And we're just going to circle it here. So here it is tonight, and over the next several weeks, it's actually going to get lower and lower in the sky. However, as it's getting lower, it's also getting a little bit brighter. And if we scale it up, it's kind of counterintuitive, because we scale it up and you look at the phase of Venus, you'll notice it's actually a very thin crescent. But it is getting brighter. And that's because from our vantage point, it's getting a little bit closer to the sun, so it's actually reflecting a little bit more light. It's also getting a little bit closer to us just in our orbits, the way they work. And over the next couple of weeks, by the end of May, it's going to be passing right in front of the sun and then reappearing a couple of weeks after that in the morning sky. Look for Venus to kind of return to the morning sky in early July. All right, so we talked enough about Venus and about some of the planets over the last previous weeks. Let's look up at the nighttime sky. So to do this, I want to actually start off in the north instead of in the west. So what we're going to do is rotate the sky. So hold on to your seats here. And then what we want to do is actually, so we can see the entire sky, I'm just going to tilt the sky just a bit, so we're looking a little bit more above the horizon here. And we're also going to go a little bit later tonight. Again, this is going to be roughly around 9:30 tonight, so a good hour and a half after sunset. Let's go a little bit later here so we can bring out some of those stars. And looking up, you might notice a couple of patterns here in the sky. Of course, I can't see hands raised or any comments from you guys, but if you look right over here and you look at this group of 7 stars, easily recognizable grouping, of course, this is the Big Dipper. And we'll just trace it out here. Very familiar pattern, of course, here in the northern hemisphere, especially in the west. There you have the Big Dipper. Let's connect those stars a little bit better so you can see it again, those 7 stars. Now we can use the dipper to actually find our way around the sky. Remember, we can use the 2 pointer stars at the front of the cup of the Big Dipper. These 2 stars right here draw a straight line towards the north. You'll hit this star right here. And of course, that is Polaris, also known as the North Star. It's hard to tell in this image, but in the real sky, the North Star is actually, remember, it's not the brightest star in our nighttime sky. It's just important because it tells us where north is. And again, I got my little pointer here, so you can look right there. That is indeed the North Star. And remember, once you find it, you can actually find it on the end of the handle of the Little Dipper. And there you go. You can find the North Star right at the end of the handle of the Little Dipper. So here we have these 2 dippers. Now, interesting about the dippers, they are not true constellations. This is, again, what we call asterisms. The true constellations, the ancients had very vivid imaginations. The Big Dipper, they connected a few more stars to it, called it Ursa Major, or the Big Bear. So you can imagine a big bear up in the sky. But of course, ours is a little different looking. We have this fuzzy, long, fluffy tail at the end of it. I mean, how many long-tailed bears do you guys see running around, really? So the story goes, and we're going to be telling a lot of constellation stories tonight, so bear with me. The story goes, Ursa Major was actually once a beautiful woman by the name of Callisto who caught the eye of Zeus. Well, the problem with that is, of course, Zeus was already married to his wife Hera. So in a jealous rage, she turned Callisto into a giant bear. So freaked out by this, Callisto ran off in the woods. Many years went by, and she came across a young archer who she recognized as her son Arcus. Arcus didn't recognize the bear as his mother, so he fit an arrow to a bow, because he was hunting at the time. He thought maybe lunch. Fit an arrow to a bow, getting ready to fire. Luckily, Zeus was watching, turned Arcus into a bear, and grabbed them both by their little stubby tails and flung them high in the sky. And so much force they used on the tug of their tails that their tails were stretched. So we have a big bear with a long fluffy tail. Well, guess what? We have a little bear in the form of a little dipper there. There's our little bear Ursa Minor with a really long fluffy tail. And the Planetarium always like to say these are two rabid squirrels up in the sky. So there's these two bears. You'll be able to see them high in the sky in the north and all spring and summer long. All right, so we can actually use the dipper to also find our way around the sky. And for that, we're just going to go even a little bit higher in the sky. We're going to turn these bears off. And if you look at the dipper, we can actually find some other things around the Big Dipper. And there's some really interesting objects kind of near the handle and a couple and one near the cup. These are actually deep sky objects outside of our Milky Way. And of course, I am talking about other galaxies. Remember, our Milky Way is a galaxy. So I circled these here. These are actually 3 spiral galaxies around the Big Dipper. If you know where to look, and even with the small telescope, you might be able to see some fuzzy patches there. Of course, with a bigger telescope and a camera, you'll be able to see a whole lot more. So let's start off with one. And some of these I actually mentioned if you tuned in last week for the Hubble show. The Hubble Space Telescope actually took some amazing photos of some of these galaxies. So we're going to start off with Messier 51, and that is, of course, the Whirlpool Galaxy. So let's zoom this up just to kind of show you a picture of what it looks like. Of course, this is not what it would look like in a telescope. It would be kind of fuzzy. But here you can see that pinwheel stars. Kind of looks like a whirlpool, if you will. Now, it's interesting. I'm going to see if I can make this work. So here you have these kind of pinwheel stars here. These are new stars that are forming. All these little peak regions are new star formation caused by gravitational interactions between the spiral galaxy. And if you look right down here, you have this other kind of galaxy, this companion galaxy that's slamming into the whirlpool. And these are actually going to do a little dance and interactions. New stars will be forming along the bands, but very cool object to see here in the north. Now, there's another galaxy just below the whirlpool, and has, of course, another spiral galaxy called the Pinwheel. Let's zoom it up. Very similar to what the Milky Way might look like, with the exception we think we have a bar going through the middle, but just your classic nice spiral galaxy. And this is designated as Messier 101. And there's actually a whole group of galaxies kind of named after the pinwheel. That's part of a group of a couple dozen or so galaxies. But you can definitely see the pinwheel near the Big Dipper. Again, decent sized telescope will allow you actually to see the fuzzy patch. Of course, you need a camera in order to get out the colors. All right, the other galaxy that's in between the Big Dipper and the North Star, just at the head of the bear, if you will, that's actually, I just like it because it's kind of a cool shaped galaxy. This is called Bode's Galaxy. It's Messier 81. Let me just kind of take a look at it. Yeah, it's a little bit flattened in the other two. It's kind of slightly tilted from our vantage point. There might be a slight bar in this one. This is, again, another classic spiral galaxy. Just beautiful galaxies you can see here in the north near the Big Dipper. Okay, so let's go and turn off M81. Let's turn around now. That's enough for right now, just in the north. We're actually going to next use the Big Dipper to find a couple of bright stars that you can see that are now pretty high up in the east. These are our spring constellations, and then we'll be heading to the morning sky to get a look at what our summer's going to be bringing over the next couple of weeks. So let's turn around, face south. Sorry, I was moving a little fast here. Okay, there you go. And just to kind of get you oriented again, I'm going to try to use my mouse. Here you can see the Big Dipper is now at the top of your screen, and we're actually facing due south. Okay, now if you follow the handle of the Big Dipper, those 3 stars that make up the handle, you connect those stars together and you can follow the arc, and you can arc all the way down to a bright red star called Arcturus. This is another kind of red supergiant star. And Arcturus is in the constellation of Boötes. So let's go bring up the stick figure of Boötes. Boötes is actually a herdsman who invented the plow, according to mythology. He is the son of Callisto, who another son of Callisto, who of course was turned into bear. We just talked about Callisto. He's actually kind of keeping an eye on the bears to make sure they kind of stay in the north, as it were. But I'll bring up some artwork here just so you can see a little bit better here. We'll take that stick figure away. So there's the herdsman. Again, it really takes a lot of imagination to see some of these. We don't really like to see the herdsman so much. We see another shape in the sky. And if you just take part of the constellation, we'll turn Boötes off here. And we see a different shape, just taking part of the constellation. And of course, for summertime, it's the ice cream cone. Although it's a little cold for ice cream. Well, it never really is. Never too cold for ice cream. But there you can see the ice cream cone high in the east now, rising right after the sunset in the east. By summertime in the next couple of months, it's going to be high overhead. And that's when we know it's definitely ice cream time, whenever the ice cream cone is directly overhead. Okay, moving on. So we arc to Arcturus. Now we can actually speed on to Spica. Spica is a hot blue star in the constellation of Virgo. The maiden in the sky, also in Roman mythology, the daughter of Jupiter and Themis. She was known as the goddess of justice. And so here you can kind of make out Virgo. Let me help you out with some artwork here. Oh, we should turn off that ice cream cone as well. So there you can see Virgo, kind of a larger constellation that makes up a huge part of the sky. Again, definitely signifying that spring is definitely here, because part of it, she's also the goddess of wheat in Greek mythology. All right, but you'll be able to see, or goddess of the harvest, I should say. So there's Virgo rising in the east. Okay, now our last kind of star hopping in the spring here. Again, we arc to Arcturus, we sped on to Spica. Now we're actually going to take a leap to Leo. Leo, of course, is one of the 12 trials of Hercules, which we're going to see in just a bit, because he's going to be rising now in the east shortly after sunset. You look for that backward question mark shape to find Leo the lion. Remember, he is a lion. Oops, sorry. I clicked the button. Excuse me. Let's actually just kind of turn back around real quick. Wasn't quite finished with that one yet. All right, there we go. I got a little button happening. Excuse me. All right, so going back to Leo here, just so you can see it. Remember, there's that stick figure of Leo. If you imagine maybe some artwork up, here's what Leo looks like, that backward question mark shape. Again, one of the 12 labors that Hercules had to face. Again, we'll be talking about Hercules in just a bit. All right, so we'll turn off Leo. High in the sky right now, really easy to spot. So now what we're going to do is actually head to the east, and we'll look over to the eastern part of the sky. We're going to go back down to the horizon now, because there's 2 constellations now that are rising in the east shortly after sunset, and one of them is actually known as the Colgate constellation. It's a little kind of backwards, it's a backward sea up in the sky. Let me go and point out, see if you guys can find it first, though, as we go along. Let me go and help you out just a bit. There's the backward sea. Kind of looks like a Colgate sea. This, of course, is Corona Borealis, the Northern Crown. And different mythologies saw the Northern Crown as different things, of course. To the Greeks, it was given by Bacchus to Ariadne after she was deserted by Theseus, king of Athens. It keeps going and going and going. To some Native Americans in this area, they're actually the kings set in kind of a circle. They actually like to gender the sky. Here we have the male sky rising in the east at spring. Pleiades marks the female gendered sky because it turns out that the Corona Borealis and the Pleiades are equally apart from the Polaris, from the North Star. So if you go equal distance in degrees across the sky from the Northern Crown to Polaris over to the Pleiades, it actually splits the sky directly in half. All right, so there's the Northern Crown. Just kind of give you an idea of what it looks like again. Kind of looks like a crown, of course, to Greek mythology. Now, there's another constellation directly to the east of the Northern Crown. That's what I kind of focus on right now. That is the constellation of Hercules. With stick figures, it doesn't look like much other than a box with a bunch of lines coming across. If we put up the artwork, you can imagine Hercules, and of course he's upside down in our artwork. In Roman mythology, he was, of course, the son of Jupiter. In Greek mythology, the son of Zeus. I guess stepson, well, not stepson, I guess, it was his son. But his mother was human, and so he was kind of a half god. And so to prove his worth, he had to face 12 trials. And of course, Leo and Hydra, Cancer, and others were kind of part of those trials. In Hercules, there's actually a couple of really cool objects. And let's go ahead and we'll turn the artwork off here. If you look right over here, I'm just going to circle this little dot with a pair of binoculars. You can actually make out this kind of fuzzy patch. Let's zoom it up. This is known as Messier 13. This is what we call a globular cluster. There's a few dozen around our Milky Way galaxy. This cluster of stars is not part of our Milky Way. These are actually outside of our galaxy in the form of a halo. There's about 500,000 stars in this cluster alone. And it's roughly, 25,000 light years away. So we know it's outside of the plane of our galaxy. The diameter of this cluster is roughly 100 light years across, 124 light years. So imagine 500,000 stars in just 100 light years across. Completely, amazingly densely populated group of stars. All right, so there is the globular cluster, easy to see with a small telescope or a pair of binoculars. So let's speed up time. We're going to head to what our summer sky will look like around early June or mid-June, because we're going to look for 3 stars. If you can't tell by temperatures, because sometimes it continues to snow well into June here in central New York. But we're going to look for 3 bright stars to return to the evening sky just after the sunset, and summer is finally here. So let's go ahead and speed up time here. And of course, if you notice, you saw the moon pop up there in the southeast. It's just past a full moon, about 3 days past. So it's going to be extremely bright, of course, if it was clear tonight. And we'll get back to that part of the sky in just a bit. But first, you'll see the 3 stars now risen over the horizon. And that's these 3 right here. Now, this triangle of stars, astronomers have very creative naming conventions. We call this, since they rise in the summer, we call this the summer triangle. And we'll connect the stars just so I can help you out a little bit. I like to see, I'm always hungry, so I always like to see a giant slice of pizza there. But the summer triangle is part of 3 ancient Greek and Roman constellations. The top star, which is the brightest star, right over here, That is the bright star Vega, and of course it's in the constellation of Lyra. And if we connect the stars of Lyra, we'll turn off the summer triangle. Here we have Lyra. You really, again, have to use a lot of imagination, because I'm sure every one of you saw a harp in these stars. And so one of the stories goes, this is a Roman story, it was invented by the child Mercury, who made it out of a tortoise shell. Mercury then stole his half-brother Apollo's cows and was taken, because he's a little bit of a troublemaker. He was taken to Mount Olympus to answer to Jupiter for his misdeed. However, the gods were impressed by Mercury's cleverness and innocence. The cows were later returned, and then Lyra was actually given to Apollo as a kind of a peace offering. And of course, the story goes, Apollo kind of handed it down as kind of a memento to his son Orpheus, who inherited a love of music from his mother. And so the story goes, it was placed in the sky to kind of remind us of kind of innocence and the magic of music, if you will. And the brightest star in the constellation, of course, is Vega, meaning the arc light of the sky, because it's extremely bright. It's the second brightest star in our nighttime sky. Vega is the brightest star in the summer sky. It is that bright star here in the summer triangle. And so here you can see Lyra, the harp. Inside Lyra, there's a really cool object to see. We saw it last week with the Hubble show, right in between the two stars at the base of the harp, right here. Let me turn off our artwork. You can see what we call the Ring Nebula. Now, this is a Hubble image. Through a small telescope, you can actually see a little ghostly ring. Our eyes are not sensitive enough to see colors. You would actually definitely be able to see this kind of ghostly ring here. But here you can see the Hubble image with its beautiful colors. The leftover star right in the middle. This is actually what we call a planetary nebula. And the leftovers are what we call white dwarfs. So the outer layers of the stars have expelled into space to form kind of this bubble around. The leftovers are as an object about the size of the Earth, but extremely, extremely dense. And this is actually what we call a white dwarf. Eventually, it'll just kind of fizzle out as it goes along. So let's go ahead and turn off the ring. The next star of the triangle is a star called the Neb. It's going to be on the left side of your screen. And of course, in the constellation of Cygnus. Let's connect the stars to Cygnus. Some stories say this as the Northern Cross. In Roman mythology, it was the story goes that Phaethon tried to drive his father's sun chariot across the sky. Of course, his father was Apollo. He did a horrible job and kind of came crashing down. If you see the Milky Way there, that's actually, he was actually struck by a thunderbolt. And he crashed, and then the Milky Way is supposed to be kind of his burn marks as he flew back down to the Earth. Unfortunately, he fell into the river Rindus, and he drowned. He had a great friend by the name of Cygnus, who wept and watched over his body in the river and wept as he bent there for a very long time, crying over his friend. His neck grew long through the weight of his sorrow. The gods felt pity on Cygnus and decided to turn him into a swan. So here we can actually see the swan, and they put them in the river, the Milky Way. So here you can see Cygnus the swan with his really long neck flying in the Milky Way there. So there's actually a really cool object here. Well, there's several cool objects. One is invisible. It's actually a black hole, one of the first black holes ever discovered, called Cygnus X1. We're not going to talk about that today. Rather, I want to look at the little star that's supposed to mark its eye. So it's all the way down near its eye. And let's go and turn off the artwork, and we'll place a marker here. So this star right here is called Albireo, and it's a really neat object to see with a pair of binoculars. Because you probably heard that many stars up there are what we call binary stars. or have one or more stars that orbit each other. This one is also a binary star, but not gravitationally bound. This is actually what we call an optical binary. And when we look at Albireo through a telescope, I have actually a blown up image here that we'll put up. This is what you would see. Of course, this is taken with a camera and processed, but through a small telescope or a pair of binoculars, you can easily make out the two stars in Albireo in that direction. One star is blue, the other star is gold. A very cool way to see star colors by looking at Albireo. They're both extremely bright from the Earth, so definitely check out Albireo over the next couple of months. Again, that marks the eye of Cygnus. Let's go and turn Albireo off. Now, the last star of the triangle is a star called Altair, and it's in the constellation of Aquila. There's a couple of stories with Aquila. This is actually known as the bird of Jupiter, who stood by the throne at Mount Olympus and used to kind of carry the thunderbolts in its claws. There's another story that he swept down and saved Ganymede from drowning in the river Rindus. So if you look at our artwork, you can kind of see that played out. It's kind of weird looking, but here you have Aquila carrying Ganymede they found. And there's other stories that Ganymede actually eventually became Mercury, the speedy messenger. So all these kind of stories in this region are actually all tied together. Okay, now what we're going to do, so I should say, look for these three bright stars rising over the east just after sunset, and you know summer is here. So we're just going to move a little bit now towards the southeast, and I want to point out a bright grouping of stars right next to the moon tonight, and it will be rising earlier and earlier. And you might notice that kind of red star just to the right of the moon. That is the bright red supergiant star called Antares, which is in the constellation of Scorpius. So here you can see the head of Scorpion rising over the horizon. Remember, Scorpius was sent after Orion to teach him a lesson because Orion was always a little too arrogant for his own good. And so the poisonous Scorpius was actually sent. There was a huge battle. Orion won the battle by killing Scorpius, but not before the scorpion stung him on the foot, causing a really nasty infection. Anyway, they were both placed in the part of the sky, but on opposite ends, so they never face each other again. So Orion is actually now setting in the west. Scorpius is now rising here in the east, another indication that summer is definitely on its way. Antares, that bright red supergiant star, and before I point that out here, I'll just put up some artwork here so you can see it. There you can see the scorpion, Antares being the heart of the scorpion. And so there's Antares right there, just so you can see it. Again, here, we'll turn that off. So there's Scorpius, meaning rival of Mars. And tonight it's going to be right next to that really bright moon, just past full moon, what we call waning gibbous phase. And over the next several weeks, let's go and turn Antares off. Over the next several weeks, watch the moon actually move throughout the sky. Because right now it's next to Antares. Tomorrow it's going to be moving roughly about 12 degrees to the east and so forth, all the way down. And then in the morning sky in the next couple of weeks, it's going to be passing by some planets. And we'll talk about that in just a bit. So I don't know if anybody's ever heard of, of course you've heard of the zodiac, the 12 zodiac signs. Did you know there was a 13th zodiac? And that the 13th zodiac is actually right next to Scorpius, and it's this one right here. If you haven't guessed it, the constellation name is Ophiuchus. And Ophiuchus is actually a physician, and also, of course, the son of Apollo. And he was actually sent to try to restore the life of Orion. Of course, the king of all the gods, Jupiter, influenced by Pluto, he didn't want his realm interrupted, stopped Ophiuchus from healing Orion. And he asked, so he actually asked him to I should say Apollo then shot the one-eyed Cyclops, which is here, the Ophiuchus, and he requested that Jupiter be placed, or place the position back in the sky. So here we have Ophiuchus next to Scorpius here. Again, Ophiuchus trying to heal Orion. Of course, Pluto would have none of that. And to kind of give you an idea of artwork, here is Ophiuchus. Again, I'm sure you guys imagine this artwork in the stars there. Ophiuchus, the physician. I'm sure everybody wants to be called, oh yeah, what's your sign? I'm an Ophiuchian. Right. Okay. So moving on. We're going to go a little bit later into the night. Let's go to a couple hours from now to roughly around 3:30 in the morning. If you like to get up early, this is a sight not to be missed coming up. So if you want to get up and rise right before the sun, you are in for a treat. And before we talk about what's happening in the morning sky, there's one more constellation I want to point out. And it's right next to Scorpius and Ophiuchus. You'll see that little constellation on the right-hand part of your screen. That is, of course, the smaller constellation we call Sagittarius. In mythology, he was known as a centaur, half man, half horse, with a bow and arrow, also known as Chiron. And if you can imagine the artwork here, there you have that half man, half horse with a bow and arrow. We don't like this. It's hard to see that sometimes. We like to see a different shape. If you take just part of the constellation, see a little tiny part, you might see this instead. This is actually, again, another asterism, just like the Dippers. Recognize it yet? I'll bring up the artwork. Has a little spout and handle. A teapot, right. If you notice at the mouth of the teapot, like you got the steam rising out of the teapot there. And that's, of course, the Milky Way rising out of that teapot. And right next to the teapot, you have something else. The little tiny grouping of stars right here. You even have a spoon. So we got a teapot and a spoon. Again, rising now. Roughly around 3 a.m. It's going to be rising earlier and earlier. But definitely check out the teapot and the spoon. And right at the spout, in between the teapot spout and the tail of Scorpius, is the center of our Milky Way galaxy. And roughly 30,000 light years away. So definitely go out and check out these. Now there's some really cool objects in this part of the sky. I do want to point those out. Let's go ahead and turn off our artwork here of the teapot and teaspoon. And if you look right over here, I'm going to point out this object is called Messier 20. And let's zoom it up. This is known as the Trifid Nebula. It's about 5,000 light years away, 5,200, give or take a couple. It's actually another kind of reflection of hydrogen gas here. You see this dark dust. This is towards the center of our Milky Way. There's a lot of gas clouds in this region of the sky. But really cool object to see through a small telescope. But right next to the Trifid, there's another nebula we call the Lagoon, which is similar to the Orion Nebula. It's right next to it here. If you ever get into astrophotography, these are some of the most beautiful nebula out there and easy to spot. The Lagoon Nebula is actually pretty bright, and you can see it fairly well from our vantage point here on the Earth. So again, definitely take a look at these. These are both, of course, highly processed images in order to get the colors. Through a small telescope, you would see kind of phasey gas clouds. Okay. Moving on. So let's go and bring these down. We're going to fast forward to a little bit later into the morning sky because there's really cool about 3 bright objects now in the morning. And here we go. We're almost finished here. So here you can see these 3 bright objects. I've circled them. Of course, these are the planets Jupiter, Saturn, and Mars. Several weeks ago, when we first started our talks, they were a lot closer together. Jupiter and Saturn are starting to kind of pull away from Mars in our sky. Mars is going to be doing a little dance here in the morning. So Mars will be up for the next couple of months in the morning sky. Jupiter and Saturn are going to be turning to the evening sky by late June. So be on the lookout for that, rising, Jupiter and Saturn rising roughly around 11 o'clock or so in the evening in the east. Mars will still be in the morning sky, joined by Venus by early July. So definitely a sight to see as these planets do a little dance over the next couple of months. Also, coming up, and we have another visitor. If you remember if you came to one of my talks a couple of weeks ago, I talked about a comet. That comet I was talking about was actually a comet by the name of Atlas. That has now broken apart and disintegrating. We were afraid of that. There was actually another comet, and it's on its way, getting pretty close to Earth. It's actually going to get about half an AU. And just kind of give you an idea of what AU is. Remember, 1 astronomical unit, that's what AU stands for, is the average distance between the Earth and the Sun, roughly about 93 million miles. So half that distance is where this comet, called Comet Swan, will be making its closest approach by late May over the next couple weeks. And it's going to be coming into the morning sky. Right now it has brightened to become just barely visible with the unaided eye, but you have to get the southern hemisphere to see it. We will be able to see it very low in the east, and then east and northeast, right before the sunrise. So if it survives its trip, if it doesn't disintegrate, it might be our first kind of fairly bright comet, but you never know these. Most of the time they just burn up as they get close to the sun. But we'll hold our breath. So here's an actual immature image of this comet. What's cool about this one, it has an extremely long tail, and you see the coma, which is the actual atmosphere around the actual comet itself, that long tail kind of trailing behind it, and it is brightening. So we hope to see it soon by the end of May. So I hope you guys enjoyed tonight. Hope you learned something. Definitely go out and take a look at some of the constellations and some of these bright stars and planets. Of course, right now, the morning sky is probably the best time to see the three, of course, Jupiter, Saturn, and Mars. The summer Milky Way is the best time to actually see the Milky Way. It's nice and bright. So get on a clear, dark night over the next couple months and try to find that kind of river of stars in the sky. So we're just going to fade this down. We're going to speed up time, and we'll let ourselves have a sunrise. And I hope you guys enjoy. So let's let our sun come up. So again, thank you very much for attending. I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your evening. Feel free to type any questions. We're actually using a new format today. This is actually what we call a webinar. There's a Q&A, so feel free to type in questions as we go along if you have any at all. So again, thank you very much. Okay, so thank you very much, everyone. Hope you guys enjoy the rest of your evening. We'll go and end the session now. Thank you very much.